Let's go back to Logic. I'm going to delete all these tracks we've just been using, and I'm going to use Alchemy within Logic. I know we could just use it within Eigenharp, but Alchemy is quite good with at accepting aftertouch, basically. So Camel Audio, Alchemy. Okay, so this is the proper Alchemy rather than the player, so I can go to advanced mode. And so let's connect aftertouch to the cutoff, filter cutoff of each note. So if I click on cutoff here within Alchemy, I'm sure this will be different for all different plugins. Down here, this is where my modulation routing is, just here. So you can say filter one cutoff. I want to route polyphonic aftertouch, is what we just connected to. So route polyphonic aftertouch to the cutoff of this filter, which is the only filter I've got turned on. Okay, and now hopefully I'll go to the Eigenharp, and well, in theory, yeah. So I've managed to connect the yaw. Basically, I'm using MIDI output 1, so I'm connected the yaw of the keys to polyphonic aftertouch, which in turn, inside Logic and Alchemy, I've connected to just the filter cutoff. So now if I play two notes, hopefully you can hear. Basically, I'm holding down two notes at once, but then I've got control of each filter independently. So so already we can, if we combine that with the polyphonic mode, now already we've got two axes of the keys sent out polyphonically via MIDI. So we could have different pitch bend for each note plus a different filter for each note over MIDI, which is kind of cool. So just so you know, so I'm not going to do any more examples of that, but if I wanted to, so back to, can you make that full screen again, please? So back to here, if I wanted to connect the roll or the pressure, all I do is replace yaw with roller pressure. So I say MIDI rig 1 scalar pressure output to MIDI converter 1 poly pressure input. And also, don't forget to disconnect what you did before. So that's these sentences up here, like MIDI converter 1 poly pressure input on connect. So yeah, there's aftertouch, and that's that. Ah. Cool. Excellent.
Okay.
I do have some questions here.
Yes, we do have some questions. You want to do the ones that we got in today?
Yeah. Questions? Yeah. Are there questions on here as well?
Not yet.
Okay. Cool.
If you want to start typing any questions that you have in, so now.
Okay.
But if you want to cover the one quickly.
This is quite a long one, by the way. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. 10 minutes. Yeah. Okay, so this is from Jose. We have a question which is, he wants to basically change the MIDI CC number of the key roll, key yaw, and key pressure. So there's, in theory this should be simple. So how it works at the moment, so as I said, there's these 3 MIDI agents that convert the data from the Eigenharp, and then we connect that to the MIDI output. So we've got the MIDI converter, which does the notes and the aftertouch, and like the velocity, and just all of the actual note data. Then we've got the MIDI controller, which takes info from the, basically sends out the MIDI control change. So it takes the information from the strip controller, the breath controller, and the movement of the keys, and sends that as MIDI control change messages out of the MIDI output. So the limitation of the MIDI controller agent at the moment is that it can only take 4 inputs. So each MIDI rig is in MIDI output 1 is part of MIDI rig 1. So that's got like all these different things in it that make it an instrument. Sorry, I lost my place. MIDI rig 1 has only one MIDI controller agent, which is what takes. When we've got MIDI output 1 selected, it takes the info from the strip controllers and turns them into MIDI control messages. And that MIDI controller agent has only got 4 inputs. So in the factory setups, what we connected to those 4 inputs was strip controller 1, strip controller 2, breath, and yaw. So that's why, well, this is why pressure and roll don't send out MIDI CC messages at the moment. And the originally behind that was well, roll is connected to pitch bend by default, and pressure is connected to aftertouch. But obviously this isn't ideal if you want to have the pressure, roll, and yaw all sending out MIDI CCs. So what we need to do is I'm going to teach you. I'm just going to go through it and explain it as I'm doing it. But I'm going to teach you how to. It's quite an advanced one, I guess. But I'm going to create another MIDI controller agent for MIDI rig 1, and I'm going to connect that to MIDI output 1. So what I'm going to do is connect pressure, roll, and yaw all to this new MIDI controller agent, so we can have a different MIDI CC number for each of these, and send it out MIDI output 1. So I'm just going to go through it and explain it while I'm doing it, I guess. So the first thing we need to do is create a new MIDI controller agent. So this is very much bel canto again. So I say MIDI controller create. So this is how we create any kind of agent. Just say the name of the agent, hit create. Check it says OK down here. It does indeed. So MIDI controller create. Then we need to give it a name, because I'm thinking, because this is for the movement of the keys, I'm going to call it key MIDI controller 1, I guess would be a good name. So what you do is you say it. The last thing you create is always referred to as it. So the last thing I created was this new MIDI controller. So I say it to key MIDI controller 1 nameifier. So this is how we name things. You say it to key MIDI controller 1 nameifier. If I wasn't naming the last thing I created, I could, for example, say console mixer to MIDI mixer 12 namify, or anything like that. So that's how you rename things. It's kind of handy to name things properly with this stuff. Okay, so it to key MIDI controller 1 namify, hit enter. So now I have an agent in my system called key MIDI controller 1. Next, I need to connect that to MIDI output 1. So I've got this new agent that will convert things into MIDI CC messages. I need those MIDI CC messages to be sent out MIDI output 1. So what I do is I say key MIDI controller 1 to MIDI output 1. Okay, a little complicated thing I have to put in here is I need to use this thing called using. I've mentioned this a couple of times before. We don't need to worry about it too much, but basically there are 3 things already connected to MIDI output 1. That is MIDI converter, MIDI controller, and MIDI clock. This was going to be the 4th thing connected to it. So what I do need to say is using for connect. You don't always have to use using, so don't worry about that too much at the moment. Okay, so key MIDI controller 1 to MIDI output 1 using for connect. Hit enter, and then look down here. It says OK. So that's all connected. Before we move on, the yaw of the keys is already connected to a MIDI CC on MIDI controller 1 agent. I'm just going to unconnect that quickly so it's not being sent out twice. So MIDI controller 1 continuous input 4 unconnect. MIDI controller 1 continuous input 4 unconnect. Basically what I'm doing is disconnecting the yaw of the keys from the MIDI controller agent that's already there, because I don't want it to have a duplicate message being sent out. So I hit enter again. MIDI controller 1 continuous input 4 unconnect. Okay, so this leaves us ready to now connect the movement of the keys to this new MIDI controller agent, key MIDI controller 1, and start sending that out MIDI output 1. So again, the same with the path with the polyphonic aftertouch. You remember we connected from MIDI rig 1 scaler to the MIDI converter aftertouch input. Same thing again. So what I'm going to do is say MIDI rig 1 scaler, and then first of all pressure output. So the pressure output from the scaler to the new key MIDI controller 1. So I'm connecting the scalar's pressure output, or the pressure output of the keys, to our new MIDI controller agent, and there are 4 inputs on the MIDI controller agent. These are called continuous input 1, continuous input 2, continuous input 3, and continuous input 4. So I'm going to connect this to number 1. So to key MIDI controller 1, continuous input 1 connect. So it's another long one. MIDI rig 1 scaler, pressure output. So there's the pressure output from MIDI rig 1 scaler to key MIDI controller 1, continuous input 1 connect. Press enter. Down here, check it says OK. It does. Says that. Okay, so now, in theory, the pressure output of the keys should be connected to the input of our new MIDI controller agent, which converts it into a CC number, which gets sent out of MIDI output 1. Before we move, the last thing we need to do before we test this is just tell the agent what MIDI CC number we want it to use. So what we do is we say key MIDI controller 1 hey. Oh, I did that wrong actually. Key MIDI, I just spelled it wrong. Key MIDI controller 1 hey. Key MIDI controller 1 hey, okay. And then I'm just going to say continuous number. Okay, so continuous number 1. So I've connected to continuous input 1 on MIDI controller, on our new MIDI controller agent. So continuous number 1, this is how I set the MIDI CC number. So I say to, I don't know, let's connect it to volume, I guess. Okay, continuous number 1 to 7 set. So I've set it to MIDI CC 7. Press enter, just check down here, it says OK. It does. Okay, so now, hopefully, if I go to I've got this MIDI monitor agent. It's from a company called Snoise, and it's really handy. So I suggest that if you haven't seen it, it's worth using it. So just, if I press a key now, you can see all this stuff that's being spat out the Eigenharp. Let me just filter out all the stuff we don't need. So if I turn off the notes after touch. Okay, so now if we look down here, if I press a key, hopefully you can see that I'm sending out loads of data on MIDI CC 7, and it's the harder I press the key, the higher the number goes. I've just noticed it's sending out on all the MIDI channels, so we do need to set the MIDI channel as well. Sorry, there's another step, but so I'm just saying key MIDI controller 1 hey, and then I'm going to say MIDI channel to 1 set. So just so you can see that, that's what I said. Okay, and that's basically that. So now I've connected the pressure. I'm sending that out MIDI output 1. Last thing I need to do is just connect up the roll and the yaw. So I'm going to say MIDI. Oh, I better type it out actually. So sorry about this. Bear with me. I'll just type this last thing in. So I say MIDI rig 1 scalar roll output 2 key MIDI controller 1 continuous input 2 connect. Okay, that says okay, and then let's do, so hopefully you saw that okay. I'll just zoom in so you can, if you need to write it down. MIDI rig 1 scalar roll output to key MIDI controller 1 continuous input 2 connect, and then the last one I'm going to do is MIDI rig 1 scalar yaw output to key MIDI controller 1 continuous input 3 connect. Okay, so that one I'll zoom in so you can see it properly. MIDI rig 1 scalar yaw output 2 key MIDI controller 1, the name of our new agent, key MIDI controller 1 continuous input 3 connect. And then now if I go back to my MIDI monitor, if I press a key, you can see it's now sending out loads of different MIDI CC messages. You do need to remember to set the CC number, so I'm not going to do it all now, but you say basically key MIDI controller 1 hey, and then you say continuous number 2 to X set and continuous number 3 to X set. So hopefully that answers